I'd like to bring the July 24th, 2018 Bristol, Virginia City Council meeting to order. I just had a couple comments to start the meeting. I just want to thank the police force and the fire department, all the emergency vehicles that responded to an incident last night. I think no one expected something like that to occur in the city that we live in, but it did. And we were just grateful that everybody responded safely, that everything came out in a positive manner. I think we underestimate the value of the police force and the fire department when things like that happen. It takes years and years before something really serious happens, but when it happens, I think they show what their training really means and how prepared they are for it based on the outcome. And I think the outcome probably went as well as it could have, so that says a lot for their professionalism, says a lot for their camaraderie and how they go about business. So glad they're safe, and we thank you for what you do every day, because everybody underestimates it. So with that said, any other council comments? Okay, city manager?
Yes, I just want to echo the mayor's comments. Last night could have been an extremely bad night in the city. However, our officers were not injured, and the 7-year-old girl was found. I can tell you that I was on scene most of the night at either one or both locations till about 11 o'clock, and the professionalism that our guys showed under tremendous amount of stress, undergoing what they'd just gone through out off of Hillside Drive and then immediately turn around and have to deal with a missing child, was tremendous, and can't thank them enough for what they did. My hat's off to those guys. We are in the process. I met with the Rotary Club today, and I will update council and the public. We're in the process of putting together a video that will highlight the city on various different fronts, and one video at the moment is in its rough, I'll say rough final stage, and we'll be having a final cut on that within the next couple of 3 days. It's a very good video. It's been done by our IT department, Gene, who's upstairs, Rick, who I think is not here tonight because he was working on the video till about 9 o'clock last night, along with Bart Poe. Very professionally done, and I think it's one way for the city to start telling our story.
And I know it got a little out of order, but I wanted to thank the police department before we had a moment of silence, so we could kind of think about that during the moment of silence. So let's have a moment of silence at this time, please. All right, please face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we got matters to be presented by the public, non-agenda items first. Is that correct? Okay. So let's see, non-agenda items. We got the first sign-up person, Scott Campbell, item number 2. Is that right?
Mayor, I think he...
They wrote over in the non-agenda section.
Okay, and I think basically, at least on the conversation I've had with him, this is technically a non-agenda item, but it could be covered under item 2 either way. I'll leave it up to council's pleasure as to how you'd want to proceed.
Does Mr. Campbell want to speak now or when we get to item 2?
I'm prepared to speak any time.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Scott Campbell. I'm a non-resident property owner in the city. As of 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I'm a non-resident owner of 2 properties in the city. I'd like to start by reading you a passage from Auditing Theory and Practice by Ronald Montgomery. The computation of goodwill. Despite all the sound reasoning and advertising experts and accountants, despite all the beating of tom-toms by underwriters and passionate promoters, goodwill is set forth in the 4th dimension of business. It is there, but the difficulty lies in making another person see it where you see it, and in making them see it as large as you see it. For like the 4th dimension, you can't feel it with your hands, The courts protect it, declare it to be as tangible as an asset as real estate. Hard-headed businessmen as well as luminous theorists insist that it be regarded as so much property. It is. It should be. But how many businessmen have any goodwill that they can sell for cash in hand? Proportionately, very few. Negotiable goodwill is the exception rather than the rule in business. Every man is positive he has some until he tries to exchange it for cash. Then the majority discovers that they either have much less than they dreamed or none that is sellable. Can the value of goodwill be anything more than each man's guess? Yes. There are rules for estimating it, and these are coming more and more into use. First, however, it is not unwise to make sure that you have some negotiable goodwill, for this depends on varying circumstances and contingencies, upon the degree to which it can be transferred, upon the public favor of each individual business, upon numberless other factors whose vital value may change with the moon. The most significant of these other factors which go to make up goodwill can be listed. They are trademarks, trade names, competition, advertising, merit of goods, location, franchises, and patents. Location sometimes counts for more than all of these other factors combined. And again, it is dwarfed to insignificance by any single one of them. These then are the properties upon which goodwill are reared. But how can its value be determined in dollars and cents? The first steps are as sound and firm as those in a government building. The net earnings of the business must be learned. One normal year may be taken by itself, or from 3 to 5 years of uneven earnings, it may be averaged. It matters not, so long as the probable net earnings for the forthcoming year are at hand to serve as a basis. From these, all authorities agree 2 deductions should now be made. One is the interest, and they quote a percent that is fairly well outdated. 2 deductions should now be made. One is the interest upon capital actually employed. The other is a sum equivalent to the owner's services to the business. I'd like for everybody to keep those words in mind while I ask this. I would respectfully request that a member of the council make a motion to begin an investigation of the proceedings in this chamber last Monday in the Planning Commission. It's my understanding in the city charter that the city manager has the authority to begin an investigation about any matter at any time at his discretion. And I would gratefully appreciate it if a member of the council would make a motion and another would second to begin an investigation of the Planning Commission's unanimous vote of the subdivision of the Clarence Dishman property last Monday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's 2 other people signed up for the same item, 2, and they said the same and non-agenda, Christy Bradley.
Hello, my name is Christy Bradley. I live at 35 Bramble Lane, Bristol, Virginia. I am a resident there. I'm a taxpayer, a property owner that shares the boundary with the Clarence Dishman property. And I agree with Scott as far as opening up an investigation of this matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, next one was Eric Bradley.
Yes, sir. My name's Eric Bradley. I also live at 35 Bramble Lane. I'm a city resident, taxpayer, and I very strongly agree with Scott Cable.
All right, thank you.
We're going to comment, Mr. Mayor, when we get to number 2 on the references made, since this is not under item 2, but we're going to comment now as council.
Well, if you give me a chance here, I was going to ask the city manager, do you want to comment now on what was just said on investigation? What are we investigating and why was that brought up? Or are we going to talk about that at number 2?
Let's just talk about it under number 2, if that's okay.
Okay. All right, there's no other No one else has signed up for non-agenda items. So the first, is there any changes to the agenda before we get started?
I don't see any.
When it comes to consent agenda, Mr. Mayor, there'll be 2 or 3 things I want to pull out separately and look at, but we can do that when we get to consent agenda.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Okay. All right, let's on to regular agenda item number 1, consider resolution concerning temporary detention order transportation. Staff report.
Council, this is a resolution that will be presented to our local legislatures in this upcoming General Assembly session. It has to do with temporary detention orders and emergency custody orders. A few years ago, the legislature approved legislation to allow for private transport companies to transport individuals who had been taken into custody under a TDO or an ECO. And with that being said, that has not either been funded by the General Assembly or the final approval has not been met within each locality to go forward with that. What we're asking in this resolution is that the General Assembly fund that portion of the legislation to allow localities to contract, or either the state contract with private enterprise in order to transport individuals who have been taken into custody under either one of those 2 devices. And also, they're asking that the General Assembly review and grant an exemption for the Southwest Virginia Mental Health Institute from the place of last resort requirement under current law. And basically what it says right now is the Institute in Marion is a place of last resort. So if we have an individual that's taken in under TDO or an ECO, Marion is the last place they can take them to, even though it's 45 minutes from us. So we have to take an individual to, well, last Wednesday or Thursday, our Sheriff's Department had to transport an individual to Norfolk. I know they regularly go to Lynchburg, they go to Petersburg, I think they go up to Stanton quite a bit, and even Roanoke. We have to bypass a facility that's perfectly capable of handling these situations to go to other places within the state. So myself, the town manager in Marion, and other county administrators and city managers have been passing around this resolution to give to our local legislators to put this on the forefront so that we can get a resolution of this. Localities spend a lot of time and money transporting individuals for TDOs and ECOs.
Okay. Doesn't look like anybody signed up for public comment. So you want to go ahead and read the resolution?
Sure. Resolution concerning the temporary detention order, TDO transportation. Whereas safe, recovery-oriented transportation is a critical need for individuals involved in the civil commitment process, offering a less traumatizing experience and facilitating more positive outcomes for individuals and their families. And whereas historically within the civil commitment process, law enforcement has provided transportation to inpatient facilities, in addition to providing a constant presence throughout the crisis evaluation process. And whereas the current system of law enforcement providing transportation for emergency custody orders and temporary detention orders is an unfunded mandate and results in undue financial and operational challenges to local municipalities and creates additional stress and trauma for the individual and the families of the person being transported by law enforcement. And whereas the current system creates a risk to maintaining safe communities by reducing the number of hours in which officers are patrolling their communities due to TDO and ECO transport duties, and creates an increased risk to those being transported because they are often alone in the back of a patrol car without proper monitoring of physiological and psychological symptoms while in transport, in some cases for up to 6 hours. And whereas in 2009, legislation was passed allowing magistrates to designate someone other than law enforcement to provide transportation under an ECO or a TDO if this could be accomplished safely, and it's perceived that alternative transportation would have a substantial positive impact on individuals, families, and law enforcement by allowing law enforcement to focus on their primary responsibilities and by destigmatizing and promoting a more recovery-oriented civil commitment process. Now, therefore, be it resolved, that should read 24th day of July, 2018, the City of Bristol, Virginia requests that the General Assembly continue to develop and adequately fund an alternative transportation system for individuals involved in the civil commitment process, recognizing the demographic and geographical challenges that rural areas in Virginia have concerning travel distances. the effect those challenges have on the emotional and financial impact of the families, and the financial distress incurred by all parties involved. And be it further resolved that the General Assembly review and grant an exemption for the Southwest Virginia Mental Health Institute from the place of last resort requirement under current law, recognizing that it is centrally located and eminently qualified to serve as a frontline regional detention center for civil commitment process, and that increasing the capacity at Southwest Virginia Mental Health Institute through increased state and local financial support would ultimately result in cost savings to the overall mental health arena.
Okay. And what's the pleasure of council?
I move that we accept this and move forward with this resolution.
I got a motion, Mr. Wingard, to accept the resolution.
I'll second.
Second with Mr. Hartley. Any council discussion?
I will say, if I heard you correctly, Mr. Eads, that some of the other localities in Southwest Virginia are behind this.
That's correct. The town of Marion's already passed it, and it's been sent out to other localities within the past week. I just went ahead and put it on our agenda now.
Good, because I think the more they hear from the localities in Southwest Virginia, the more impact this will have, so.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, we got a motion with Mr. Wingard, a second Mr. Hartley. Please call the roll.
Fleener. Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, agenda item 2, consider granting final plat approval for Plat 12-2018 for Clarence Dishman property subdivision. Staff report.
Council, the applicant is seeking a final plat approval to create one new lot by dividing 37.9 acre tract into 2 portions. The plat also includes the addition of a small section, .133 acres, which had been a reserve strip in the Shadow Valley subdivision, which is needed to provide access to the larger portion once it is subdivided. The resulting 2 tracts will be 32.58 acres, Lot 6A, including the 50-foot wide access strip, and 5.437 acres, Lot 6B, with frontage on Stagecoach Road. The Planning Commission approved the preliminary and final plat for the Clarence Dishman subdivision on July 16, 2008. I've concluded that the plat is in order, and I recommend the final approval of the final plat of the Clarence Dishman property subdivision.
Okay, we've got several people, same people signed up for this item. Scott Campbell.
I have, I'm Scott Campbell, non-resident, property owner, taxpayer, etc. What I have here is a copy of the final plat. I'm no attorney, no legal expert, but I can tell you that there are precisely 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 adjoining property owners listed on this plat, none of which would be aware whatsoever of this proceeding tonight had it not been for my intervention. A lot of them couldn't come and be here tonight. This property also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a minimum of 5 adjoining property owners in Washington County. The subdivision of this property opens the door for development of the back 32.5 acres that had not been open for the last 41 years. And that's because they've constructed this plat to look like it's a right-of-way. And I understand that your assertion that it's a reserve strip, it's all well and good, but the piece of property that I bought yesterday, I have a survey on it right now. And well, I have it, but as you can see, I got a lot of documentation. But there actually is a designation for reserving what is to become eventually a city road and a right-of-way. And that designation on the survey of the property that I bought yesterday is highlighted on that survey as an undeveloped alley or an undeveloped right-of-way. The Planning Commission's recommendation that they heard on Monday included a lot of references to the Shadow Valley subdivision. Shadow Valley subdivision was, from what I understand, started by Charles Lowry Sr. sometime in the 60s. And interestingly enough, Shadow Valley Incorporated was dissolved May the 29th, 2018, 48 hours before the deed to this property was written. So I don't know who all wants to know who's doing business and doing stuff with the property that they live next door to, but I pay attention to these things. I've personally made Clarence Dishman offers on portions or an easement on this property. I would be interested in an easement on this property to bring my property in. Is anybody here willing to defer 3 minutes to myself to finish what I have to say?
I didn't sign up, but you had any I might get.
Thank you.
You have to ask the mayor, you have to ask.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a little extra time? Sure. Kind of lost train of thought there, but I think the bottom line is pretty clear. This subdivision line was presented to the Planning Commission as being necessary to increase the marketability of Mr. Dishman's property. Nobody's offering me any government action to increase the marketability of my property. Nobody's making me aware of any government action to increase the marketability of my property. So something's upside down and wrong about this situation. I don't know what it is. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what's legal and what's proper, but I know what's right and what's wrong. And for this large of a potential upheaval to be thrust into this community in the midst of the financial problems that you're already trying to solve is definitely not the thing that this city needs right now. And I think the smart move would be to, at the very least, take a little more time and consideration in this. And if the zoning laws don't provide for notifying your neighbors of changes to properties next to you, maybe it's time we reevaluate the zoning laws. You know, I don't know what's wrong, but I do know what's not right, and it's this. So that's all I have to say for right this second. And I thank you very much for the council and Mr. Mayor for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, Christy Bradley want to speak again?
Okay, I'm Christy Bradley, taxpayer, resident of 35 Bramble Lane, boundary on the other side of that property Scott is talking about. It is my concern of the congestion that will come into this neighborhood right along the side of my house. I have children. It will just be a cluster. I agree with everything that Scott had said. So in that nature, please take in consideration, please.
Thank you. Eric Bradley?
Eric Bradley, resident, taxpayer, 35 Bramble Lane. You know, I'm not don't know anything about the law or how y'all do stuff. You know, I design and engineer power grids, and I've dealt with a whole lot of right-of-ways. And from what I see, that I mean, it's not right-of-way. But like I say, I'm not a legal person. But I completely agree with what Scott Campbell says, and I just wish we could take a little longer to look at this.
All right,
Thank you for your
thank
time.
you. All right, that's everybody signed up for public comment. So what's the pleasure of council?
I make a motion that we move forward with granting this final plat.
Okay, got a motion from Mr. Wingard to move forward with the final plat approval.
I'll second.
And second, Mr. Osborne. Council discussion?
Oh, yes. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for showing up. Mr. Campbell, particularly yourself, and I know you brought the others. I'm real concerned myself that there's not been public notice of anything, and then just arbitrarily doing it. That's how I see it. So your answer, you ask if somebody can make a motion. I can make all the motions in the world up here tonight, and it's going to be 4-1 to approve this plat. And we don't need, though, you don't need the city attorney, city manager to investigate this. Okay? But I'm concerned about the children issue. Obviously, it's crowded enough up in there right now, and it's just going to get worse. And it always concerns me when something is thrown up here to the people in a fly-by-night kind of situation.
Could I add a comment also?
Hang on. Nope, not right now.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, I agree with what you're saying. Property interest of people is a very valuable tool. And if they go ahead with this tonight and there wasn't notice to 11 adjourning property owners, then I think there's going to be some real serious issues going forward. That's my opinion. And like someone said, I'm not a lawyer. Well, I unfortunately am one, but I don't do property law. But it just seems to me that if you're going to take property without due process of law, you better give notice to your adjoining property owners. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. So from my perspective, I think it was hastily done, shoddily done, and terribly done. Now, that may not be, maybe I'm not being real sweet, but that's just how I see it. And, you know, every dog has his day, and, you know, so maybe, just maybe, we'll see what happens going down the road. But that's my opinion, that's my comments. Vote it up.
Other council comments?
Well, my comments on it is, I serve on the planning commission. And the property that is facing Stagecoach Road is in our comprehensive plan as future business zoning. The owner of the property seek the city to rezone it, to make it more viable for commercial use should the need arise. Right now, it's all R1. But basically, he just asked for a line to be drawn between his property. And I see no negative impact on the city for that. And by right, it is zoned R1. So the residents that are here tonight, by right, the landowner can go in that property at any time and pull the permits and build houses in there. All he needs is 12,000 square feet per lot, and that property can sustain somewhere around 23 to 24 homes with 12,000 square foot set aside for each lot. Now, by right, he has the right to do that. If we get into a position to where landowners do not have rights as being a landowner, then we will quickly find ourselves in a position where land will be devalued and nobody will be buying because nobody will have any rights. Right now, the way it stands, all the property is zoned R1 for residential development. There's nothing nobody up here can do about it. It's by right. So the issue is this line to subdivide, which is sitting right beside of Ernie Solon's clothing, in an area that is heavily populated with traffic, exit 7. So the Planning Commission saw no issue with allowing this line to move forward. And as we sit here tonight, I see no issue with having this line move forward.
Okay, any other questions or comments from other council?
I'd just like to point out the scope of this thing we're considering is very limited. We're just solely just adding the line.
That's it.
We're not approving for anyone to build a bunch of houses.
No, we're not.
We're just literally splitting this property that's already existing that the guy already owns.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. So several things were brought up in the public comment, and I want the city manager. Now I want you to put your city attorney hat on, okay? You clear on that, right? City attorney hat, right? So the first thing was the notification of the landowners. That was brought up. There's 11 adjoining landowners, I heard. What does
In the city.
excuse me, we're into council discussion. Just let us finish. So 11 adjoining landowners. So what does the city charter and our policies and law require as far as notification of the adjoining landowners?
There's no requirement of notification either by state law, by charter, or by any rule in regards to, and Mr. Osborne's correct, this is just a division of property. It's completely different if it was a rezoning of property. That's where your notification has to come out. This is just a division of the property. So there's no notice requirement in regards to other adjoining property owners.
So if I own 60 acres in the city or 10 acres or how many acres, and all I want to do is take that and break it up into sections and call this 10 acres different than this 10, and I'm drawing a line between them and call them two different map plat or map locations, I can do that without any notification.
Well, there's notification by virtue of the notice that you put out for the planning commission when you have, you publicize the agenda just like we do for council meetings. Everything is published prior to the meeting just like it's supposed to be. But as far as any formal notification that you would have in a rezoning type situation, there is no formal notification of that.
And when was the planning commission meeting on this topic?
July 16th.
And that notification went out as required by law days
It
prior?
went out per the planning commission rules in regards to the notices of their agenda.
Okay, as far as the designation of a right-of-way, the legal description, the legality of putting a line in there and calling it designated for future whatever, or right-of-way, speak to that legality?
Really, there is no right-of-way issue involved in this. That's what we call in the legal world a red herring. This is, there's no dispute as to a right-of-way. I think Mr. Campbell is concerned about access. Gene, can you pull up that plat? It's on the agenda packet, page, probably about the 6th or 7th page, 8th page, page 8. I would have you look at your plats, but it's kind of
You can't
difficult
see
to
it.
read. So hopefully we can. Okay. All right, we'll come back to that real quick. But really what the issue is, there's not a right-of-way issue here. The only thing that is issue tonight is the division of the property. There's an access point. I'll show that to you here in a second. You'll see there's a little strip of land with a star. I can go into the history of that. Really need that. Is there another question you have, Mr. Mumpower, in regards to this? And then
A couple.
Yeah, so let's move on to one of those and I'll come back to explaining.
It was mentioned, and you may not know, but investigations. I heard the term, we should investigate what happened at the planning commission. I heard the fact that 48 hours prior to the deed being issued, it was dissolved. The entity that set up the Shadow Valley subdivision was dissolved. So I'm not connecting all the dots to say what have we seen that would be investigatively suspicious?
Well, nothing in regards to the city, in my opinion, that the city would have anything to do with. Gene, can you scroll in, highlight that area that has the star there on the very bottom portion of the plat, right? There's a star. Go over to your right. It's right in the middle of that line right there. If you can just kind of zoom in on that. Okay, so what you have, if you look, you see that you got 2 lots designated. One lot's designated 6B, which fronts Old Stagecoach Road, the other 6A. The line in question, and for the only purpose of this being on the agenda tonight, is to approve the final plat of that new division line. And you can see that that runs from the corner of the property that is currently owned by Ernie Sullivan's Clothing Outlet to the north up near Hickory Drive. So that, first and foremost, that's the only thing at issue tonight. In regards to access right-of-ways, the issue that is, I believe what Mr. Campbell is referring to, is that little strip of property right there where the star is located. That is a 50-foot strip of property. When this property was developed years ago as Spring Valley Subdivision, all the property was owned by Spring Valley, I think it was LLC, Subdivision LLC, can't remember the exact title. And for inception, that little parcel of property that you see there with the star in it had not been titled to anyone. It was Spring Valley's property. Spring Valley had never done anything with it.
You mean Shadow Valley?
Shadow Valley, I'm sorry. I keep saying Spring Valley. Sorry. Shadow Valley. And so that Shadow Valley was dissolved on May the 29th, which there's nothing preventing LLC from being dissolved. That's completely proper and legal. By virtue of that being dissolved, the predecessors in title, which was I think Mr. Lowry's son, owned that small strip of land. From information that I've gathered, whether, I'm not sure if Mr. Dishman approached Mr. Lowry, I think Mr. Dishman's here tonight, or I'm not sure if Mr. Lowry approached Mr. Dishman. But this is what has brought everyone in tonight, is this little strip of land. That little strip was deeded to Mr. Dishman by quit claim deed. Now, quit claim deed is a deed that just gives you title to property. It doesn't warrant anything in regards to if that is good title to that property. So Mr. Dishman now owns that tract of land. There's nothing illegal with that. It's a transaction between 2 private individuals. Now, by virtue of Mr. Dishman owning that small tract of land that adjuts the Bramble Lane right-of-way, Mr. Dishman now has access from Bramble Lane to the 32.5 acres. So that's the issue that I think Mr. Campbell is upset about tonight, is that issue. But that is not before this council. The only thing before this council tonight is whether or not to grant approval on that final plat that you see before you with the new division line.
Okay.
And can you elaborate on his question about the investigation? Did you see anything, you was there, did you see anything that would warrant an investigation on the Planning Commission?
Everything that I've seen, it was advertised properly in regards to the agenda. You had a hearing on it. It was open to the public. I didn't see anything, you know, if Mr. Campbell and I have had numerous conversations over the past week about this. I know he disagrees with it. I don't think he's enunciated to me what he disagrees with, other than the fact he just disagrees with the way that it was done. I haven't seen anything that would warrant an investigation at this time.
So one thing that would warrant investigation is anybody on the Planning Commission's got any direct business, indirectly or directly related to this change, we'll call it a change, right?
Right.
Plans of future development. So do you know or sense that there's any conflict of interest on that front?
I know of no conflict of interest that any, let me put it this way, there has not been a member of the Planning Commission or the Planning Commission staff that has come to me and said, Randy, I have an issue, is this a conflict of interest? So if someone in the back of their mind has a conflict of interest, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
I will say that Mr. Campbell believes that Ms. Morgan potentially has a conflict because he believes that Mr. Dishman and Ms. Morgan are personal friends. There is no personal relationship between the two. Ms. Morgan would testify, and her credibility, believes that there is a personal relationship between Mr. Dishman and Ms. Campbell, or Mr. Dishman and Ms. Morgan. And Ms. Morgan says the only time she has ever had any interaction with Mr. Dishman is in her office in regards to the division of this property.
Is there any time-sensitive items related to what we're talking about?
From my understanding, I think Mr. Dishman maybe has this under contract for auction in September, is that right? And that would be the only time-sensitive matter at this point.
Okay, so let me finish up. I think I've got all my questions answered. When anybody brings up investigation and there's a sense of wrongdoing, right? Whether there is or not, I think we have an obligation, right, to give that time to be looked at, to make sure beyond a shadow of a doubt there's nothing going on in this case. So the reason I asked the time-sensitive question, there's no urgency to, do this tonight. I think we owe it to the community to look at everything very diligently. Whether we agree we should look at it or not is beside the question. Maybe we find something, maybe we don't, right? But when it's brought up, we should take a deep breath and look at it. So that's our obligation. So I'm recommending that we table the item.
Well, there's
Right.
a motion on the floor right now.
I understand that. I'm just finishing my thought.
Okay.
We'll get to the procedural stuff here in a second. So my recommendation is we have the motion that was made withdrawn, and we re-motion to table the item to give our attorney time to do the due diligence, to make sure, and to document the investigative side of this issue, right? Since that's the right thing to do, since we don't have any requirements to notify landowners. I think in the report that you come back to council, you should, state what we could do maybe to improve our charter or improve the planning commission's procedures, to add that if it meets certain criteria. And I do agree that just because a landowner owns an amount of property and all he's wanting to do is subdivide it does not necessarily need anybody's approval. If I owned that property and I had to get your approval and your approval and your approval and all my neighbors' approval, I would not be a happy camper. That's not why I bought that property. But now when I want to go rezone it and I want to turn it from residential into light industrial, right, or commercial or agricultural, now I'm changing the purpose at which I bought the property. I have to get all kinds of people to approve it then, because I'm changing what I bought it for. So I do agree with you that we're not voting on the rezoning thereof, that property tonight, but I think we should table it just to take a hard look at the conflict of interest side, just to make sure everything is clean and above board. We don't want the perception, whether it's today or next week, that something may be awry in the city. We don't need that, right? We need to stay focused on the important things we're doing, keep this city moving forward, right? So that's my recommendation to council.
Well, let me say this. I think there are things, first of all, that you're wrong about when you say, if you own this property, you can do this. Those 11 landowners that are in the city of Bristol, Virginia, that abut this property, there's setbacks and so forth and so on. So they'd have to have notices and so forth. So it's not just as easy as you go up and you fling down 23 houses, I think the site supposedly could have. So it's not like that. If it came to subdividing the property, there would have to be notice, particularly if it encumbers adjoining landowners. And this is a problem we're getting into right here, right now. And I mentioned this before, the label interim city attorney. He's sitting in two hats tonight. And this is a pretty significant thing, a pretty significant circumstance. And, the word interim does not mean a year by any stretch of the imagination. Interim means, look at the definition in the book, it means short time. And I think this is just another arrow toward splitting the roles and responsibilities between city attorney and city manager up. And so, I would like a definition of what the word interim means pretty soon from this council, because the longer we seem with that tag, the more I think we endanger our perspective here as city councilmen, not just as councilmen, but as individuals, potentially for a conflict or whatever. And I would ask somebody to do a state corporation commission check, see if there's been any LLCs, LLPs, corporations filed and so forth and so on within the last month or two, because that would show a lot too. And, but that's another story for another day. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I think that point's valid. I'll say this. I think when we look at the legality of this, I think if it's rising to the level that we've all talked about, that, you know, we should get outside third-party legal, you know, to look at it as an unbiased legal opinion. I think this may warrant that. So you're kind of stepping back from it from a city manager standpoint, even though we know you're an attorney and you got all the experience for that. I would be comfortable that we table it and direct the city manager to have a third-party attorney firm look at the legality of it. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'd prefer it be outside of Bristol city limits.
And we set aside money for that purpose, right? We did that at the beginning of the budget cycle, so.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have some more comments on this. All right, for full disclosure, since you made a comment, for full disclosure, I own a house on Georgia Street, which is the far left there. I've owned that house for about 20 years now, okay? But there is no conflict of interest here. We are not talking about rezoning. We are talking about subdividing, splitting the land, okay? I have no part of this. And if the city planning and council does not have the right to draw a line from one side of the property to another and split it, when the purpose of the property, R1, remains the same, then I'm just totally confused. And I don't understand government. This gentleman asked for a line to split some property. It's R1 on the front side, R1 on the back side. He just wants to subdivide his land. And now we're talking outside attorneys, this, that, and everything else. I'm blown away. I'm just blown away.
Well, I'm not blown away because if someone in the community raises an investigative comment,
I understand that.
we're responsible to double check.
I understand that.
That's all we're saying.
I understand that. And I agree. We don't need our citizens feeling like we're railroading them.
That's right.
So if they need a little bit more time to get more educated and everybody else get more educated on this, I have no problem with that. So I made the motion.
So the best example I can give on the, to draw relines here, like if someone passes away and that they own that property and the heirs take over that property, they may want to subdivide that and sell it off in smaller acreages, right? They may want to take the 37 acres or whatever and sell them in 10-acre plats. So they would want to subdivide it. So they could do that. It would be easy for them to do that without any approvals, right? So you go and get the real estate appraisal, you get it drawn up, you get the surveys done, you go through all that stuff, and that's an example where somebody would want to do that, not necessarily having the intent of turning it commercial or doing anything else with it. So there's lots of cases where prohibiting people from doing that is also problematic, because that's kind of a situation that can occur too. So all I'm saying is my recommendation is we just table it, give it time to get looked at, and then we readdress it once once the information comes back. So we're not under any time period to press on, so I'm just asking for a
Well, right now it
motion.
has to be, since there's been a second on it, it has to be voted up or down at this point.
And to vote it down is just going to buy some time and let everybody get acclimated and get them more educated on it. Correct?
Can always come back.
We can always come back.
So if it's voted down, it can come back at the next meeting? Or does it, I think Mr. Wingard was willing to withdraw his motion, and it seems to me if Mr. Osborne would as well, then we could withdraw the motion and make a motion to table.
I think we need to look at Robert's Rules of Order on that real quick. We can do that.
Well, I mean,
if we're going to do, here's the deal.
Let's just vote it down and.
well, that's fine. I just want to make sure it can come back is all.
Well, and that's what I'm not 100% sure on, what that length of time is before it can come back. So it may create an issue.
Because, I don't mind waiting, the next meeting would be 3 weeks. I would think that'd be sufficient if there's something that pops up. Otherwise, we could go ahead. I don't want to, like Mayor says, if there's a question raised, then, yeah, we probably should stop for a minute and doing the due diligence is fine if there's no other reason to press ahead. But I just want to make sure that, this can come back in a timely manner.
Council, I think if you vote it down, I can bring that back at the next meeting in August.
So the first council meeting in August. All right, so whoever made the motion, it's up to you.
I withdraw my motion. Oh, okay. We got to vote it up or down?
He said he wants to withdraw the motion now.
We need an attorney.
Hard to hire around here.
You need to vote it up or down. There's no
Okay.
two motions.
All right, any other discussion? Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
No, ma'am.
I have something that could help you all.
We're fine. We're right into discussion, ma'am. We're
You
fine.
could end up in court, and I can keep you out. If you will give me about a minute.
Okay, go up to the podium. You get 1 minute. This is
Can we pay her a
highly
retainer?
unusual.
Can we pay her a retainer? I'd like to.
It may be a Marnie minute, but it'll be a minute.
I don't think it changes
Mr.
anything.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Nancy Marty. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a property owner. I have experience with quick claim on property. Now, my concern with this, and I promise I'm going to be quick, my concern with this is that quick claim. Because as I understand this, even though that is a small piece of property, that quick claim, if it were challenged legally, could affect the marketability of that whole tract of land. Now, I went through this. I've been through this. And fortunately, I was smarter than 4 lawyers and my family, because I hired a very good lawyer and he said, no, we're not going with the quick claim, we're going to go with the real thing. We dotted all the I's, crossed the T's, the whole thing, and the one and only thing that could have invalidated that, and everybody said it'll never happen, in 4 years it did happen. But it had no consequence because I hired a good lawyer who dotted the I's, crossed the T's. It was the quick claim that was the only issue. And that's the issue I'm zeroing in on here tonight. And I know Mr. Dishman, a fine, fine man, no ulterior motives. But this could affect the marketability of that property if somebody hires a good whiz-bang lawyer and challenges that one issue, the quick claim. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do appreciate that. I hope it will help you all.
Council, if I may address that.
Sure.
That quit claim deed has nothing to do with the city. That is between 2 private individuals. If there is an issue with that title, that will be Mr. Dishman's problem and probably the successor in title if someone purchases that property and there's issue with it. It's going to be Mr. Dishman or the next landowner who would have to deal with that parcel of property. That has absolutely nothing to do with the city process in approving this plat or disapproving this plat. This has everything to do, everyone is upset about this parcel of property right now being given or sold or given, whatever it was, to Mr. Dishman. And that's the problem because people are concerned about potential development on that 32 acres. And that's not what we're here for tonight. I think if Mr. Osborne withdraw his motion and Mr. Wingard withdraw his, I think after the discussion, I think we'll be okay with withdrawing the motion and tabling it, if that's what y'all choose to do.
I'm fine with withdrawing it right now.
I move to withdraw the motion and table it.
Okay, so we withdraw the first motion,
Withdraw the first.
so we're making a motion now to table the item.
I make a motion to table.
Second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion now to table the item for further investigation and a second. Any other discussion? All right, please call a roll.
Fleener. Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes.
And counsel, I'd like to know the scope of the investigation that you want me to investigate in regards to this matter.
Okay. All right, next item number 3, consider granting final plat approval, plat 11-2018, Linden Square subdivision, replat of parcel A. Staff report.
Council, this is a parcel of property located off the corner of Linden Drive and, give me just a moment, it's behind Tinseltown. And it's for a proposed car wash that is actually in the process of being built as we speak. So this is just a final plat approval for that parcel of property there at the corner of Linden Drive behind Tinseltown for the purpose of, there's actually a car wash that's being built currently, and we just need final plat approval. It's already been approved at the Planning Commission on July 16th.
Okay, no one signed up for this item. Need a council motion and second on this agenda item.
I move that we accept the final grant, the final plat.
Okay, got a motion, Mr. Wingard,
Second.
second, Mr. Osborne. Any council discussion?
I'm just glad to see brick and mortar going up in this city. Everything's looking good on Euclid Avenue. That car wash should be up and running fairly soon. The 2 restaurants are coming together, looking good, and Hobby Lobby's fixing to open, and that's what this city needs. We got a brick and mortar going up.
We must be selling lots of cars or getting lots of cars dirty or something.
We're doing
Putting up
something.
all the car washes, right?
Do have one quick question. Linden Square Drive that would provide access to the Lot B, is that a public drive or
Linden?
private?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure. It's hard to tell reading this. I just want to make sure they had access.
And then, council, I need to read that resolution too. That appears not to have been on the agenda, so I need to read it prior to vote, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia, approving the final plat number 11-2018 for the Linden Square subdivision replat of parcel A. The City Council finds that whereas the subdivision plat for the Linden Square subdivision replat of parcel A has been properly submitted to the city and reviewed by city staff, and whereas the Planning Commission met on July 16, 2018 and approved the preliminary plat and the final plat, and whereas section 50-270 requires that the plat of the subdivision be approved and certified by City Council before it can be recorded. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of Bristol, Virginia. The council approves and certifies the final plat, plat number 11-2018 for Linden Square subdivision, replat of parcel A as attached in Exhibit A, passed and adopted by the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia at a regularly scheduled meeting of said council on July 24, 2018.
Any other council discussion? All right, so we got a motion by Mr. Wingard and a second by Mr. Osborne. So please call the roll.
Fleener. Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. So item 4, consider allowing city manager and member of council to sign a surety agreement for American Merchant Water Treatment Project. Staff report.
Stand up for this one. Okay, here we go. This is in regards to American Merchant and the water treatment plant that they applied for a grant through the City of Bristol back in October, which was approved through the Appalachian Regional Commission for a grant in the amount of $500,000. the 700,000. I'll show you where that's going in just a second. This, by virtue of applying for that grant, there are several stipulations that the Appalachian Regional Commission puts on a locality when they apply for a grant. As you can see here, the Appalachian Regional Commission has approved $500,000. That $500,000 flows to the city of Bristol, which then flows over to ProChem, which was awarded the contract for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant. American Merchant will pay $700,000 to ProChem, roughly, for that plant. So the plant is a total of approximately $1.2 million. American Merchant will also be providing jobs and machine and equipment taxes here within the city that we're not currently have or receiving. Now, the Appalachian Regional Commission, in order for this grant to continue, requires the city, one, either provide a letter of credit in the amount of $500,000 to the Appalachian Regional Commission, which a letter of credit is considered debt. I don't feel like that this council would approve an additional $500,000 in debt if I came and asked for a letter, to sign off on a letter of credit for this project. So with that being said, we started looking at different options. I believe on June the 7th, we met with ARC. I provided them a letter from our local bank, Home Trust Bank, that the city currently has a tax anticipation note in the amount of $2 million that we could draw on if we needed. ARC would not accept that as a letter of credit. They wanted a formal letter of credit. So we went back to the drawing board. Part of that drawing board required American Merchant to begin to be involved, and we started looking at a performance bond. And this bond was to protect the city in the event the project did not go to completion or the number of jobs that were promised in the ARC grant application were not met. So I have Mr. Dale Cook here with the CSE Insurance Agency. He's been working with American Merchant in this process to have a performance bond. We met last Thursday. We thought we had everything ironed out to allow a performance bond to be in place. However, the insurance company required indemnification by the city if the project fell through, which means the insurance company could come, they would pay ARC $500,000, but then the insurance company would be coming back seeking $500,000 from the city. I did not feel comfortable signing that bond as it was proposed. Went back to the drawing board again, contacted ARC. ARC is now willing to allow, and this is the process that was set up now, as proposed. ARC now is okay with substituting City of Bristol with American Merchant. And that way the City of Bristol is completely out of the picture. Indemnification, the insurance company would have to go to American Merchant to seek indemnification, and the insurance company would be liable for the $500,000 if American Merchant does not produce the jobs. Now, what you have before you is I'm asking permission for myself and one member of council to sign the surety agreement as you see proposed here, which could mean the city is liable. I will only sign that if and when and after I brief council on all those matters, because the city could be liable for $500,000. We are in a situation at this point, if we do not give ARC some sort of either a letter of credit or some sort of performance bond, it will, I'm not saying everything would fall apart, but it's going to make it very difficult to move forward, and we'll have to find some other solutions. We've even proposed putting $500,000 in a separate account, and ARC would not, they wouldn't even allow that at this point. They said that was too much of an accounting nightmare. So we're doing everything that we can in order to move this process along so American Merchant can start on the wastewater treatment plant. Every single day that we wait is a day that they are waiting on that wastewater treatment plant, and it's also a day that people are not getting hired for the jobs that they have, are expecting here in the city of Bristol. Any questions?
Any questions?
Indemnification to me means somebody's gonna pay somebody back.
Right,
It's no different from a subrogation agreement.
Right.
And so until we see the contract of insurance between whomever, from Mr. Cook, whatever, and we actually get to eyeball the language individually.
It's in your packet.
I'd be remiss to not ask to see that beforehand. I was here January 9th, 2018. We had this discussion about this and so forth. Bristol, Virginia would be on the hook for nothing. Go back and look at the tape, but thank God for videos. And, you know, no responsibility. And now we're talking possibility of $500,000. My, oh my. Something's changed, or something wasn't known when it was first processed here. Regardless, Bristol doesn't have $500,000, period. And to go along with giving $500,000, or putting Bristol, Virginia taxpayers on risk for another $500,000, well, but not very comfortable with that prospect at all. But that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Well, I think Mr. Fleener's got a valid point, and I will say, nobody's putting the city on the hook for another $500,000, because we don't have the ability to do that. So we're not going to do that. So if the language doesn't get worked out between the insurance company and ARC and the entity here that needs the wastewater treatment to start, where we're completely indemnified from a financial obligation standpoint, then nothing gets signed. So what Mr. Eads is asking for is that's what we approve. If we don't get 100% clear indemnification, $0 liability, we sign nothing. So that's what council's voting for tonight. Otherwise, it's pretty clear. It's a no vote, because we don't have the means to financially take the risk of any private entity or otherwise coming forward and putting a $500,000 obligation in front of us that we may have to stand behind. We can't do that. We all know that.
Are we still going to have to pay the insurance contract, whatever? Is the city going to be responsible, or is ARC going to be responsible for that, if you understand it right now? And if we're responsible for it, tell us how much that's going to be.
You mean the bond,
I'm talking about
the bond,
$500,000, whatever.
the bond premium?
Yes.
No.
We pay for it as ARC.
No, that's under, I think, 9.2 of the consent agenda. That is, there's a $10,000 item on there where American Merchant, as of last Thursday morning at 8:59 a.m., everyone thought this was moving forward the way that we all anticipated it moving forward. However, when I met with Mr. Cook, who is, I cannot sing his praises enough, he has gone above and beyond in this process to help American Merchant and to help the city out. He is fabulous to work with. American Merchant brought a check Thursday morning for $10,000, which was deposited into the city's account, which would have paid that bond premium had I moved forward. I did not feel comfortable moving forward. Mr. Wingard was at the meeting. I did not feel comfortable moving forward, and that's why I stopped that process at that time, because one, I need to alert council that there is an indemnification clause in that contract, and two, let council know that I'm working on other potential options to solve this problem, because we have an employer who's promising 405 jobs here in the city of Bristol, and as one of my goals for this year, I want to make sure American Merchant's up and running. And to get that done, I'm using every available resource that I have in order to make it happen. We're just in a situation right now where I do not know what American Merchant will do in the event we cannot get this worked out and they don't get their money from ARC.
It doesn't seem to me we need to sign anything until you get this and so forth worked out. It seems like that particular thing needs to be tabled tonight.
It can either be tabled, or we put a provision in there that I come back before signature, before it's signed. So either way, I mean, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Well,
But I think we're under such tight time constraints with this. As I said, the contract with ProChem requires them to get the plant completed by November the 15th. They were anticipating once the contract is awarded that we could sign it, and that's not the case. We have to have an ARC management team meeting with the city, with every other stakeholder involved. Assuming we went forward today, the earliest I could probably sign this contract would be Friday or one day next week by the time I get ARC involved. So it's not an easy process. nothing against ProCam, they've just never had to deal with a grant like this, so they don't understand the process. And it's just a lengthy process to get done. They assumed it worked like any other RFP with a locality, that once the RFP was awarded, they can move forward, but it doesn't work that way.
Is there any other questions or discussion from council? All right, so I will say, you're saying a week to get all the language changed and get the indemnification of the city 100% out of the contractual language, so you're.
I think we'll know something. We were hoping, and Mr. Cook has worked diligently. We talked Friday evening, probably around 5:30 or 6. He called me last night, right around 6, or maybe right before 5 o'clock, and I didn't get a chance to call him back. I was intending to call him back and talk to him today, but I think we'll probably have an answer in very short order, probably within the next 48 hours, don't you think?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You want to explain the other option, or?
Well, we can deal with that later. So,
All right, so I guess my recommendation is that we take a motion to table it to give chance for the contractual language and the last items to be worked out. Being an operations manager at big plants that I've installed waste treatment facilities, so a week does not cause Rome to fall down, right? If you're a good operations organization, you will figure out how to recover your schedule. So we need to make sure we're covering the legalities and the financial stuff with Mr. Reeves and the attorneys properly. So that's my recommendation, is we table it until. I'm not finished talking yet. I'm just seeing if any other council's got, hang on just a second. Let me see if any other council's got discussion. You'll be coming up. You'll be coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Any other comment? Any other comment? Any other comment?
Yeah, I've got a comment. All right. Am I understanding this right, that you're seeking seeking council approval to move forward with this if and only if we are free and clear from the liability? Should the language not be able to be changed, it's dead in the water.
if we are free and clear, then the city will not sign anything. It will
Okay.
be strictly between American Merchant and the insurance company and ARC at that point.
But your motion, it wants you wearing two hats and one councilman to approve this and have authority from this council to sign off yourself. And with one councilman, you want some councilman to have that responsibility to do that. That's what you're asking for in this motion tonight.
That's what the insurance company requires on the bond, that a member of the elected body and a member of the management team sign it. That's no different than any other thing that's required, signature by a mayor or someone from management. It's it's no different than anything else that we jointly sign. Mr. Wingard is correct in the fact that we need to have a discussion. If all other options come back and the city's on the hook for $500,000, what are we going to do?
Should have known that in January.
You know,
Well, it's not,
Should've known
what-
that
it's not,
January.
no, it's not what we're gonna do. It's
Right.
the responsibility of the private business. This is their project.
Yeah, but we were sold it
It's
wasn't
just
going to be any
like-
responsibility, Mr. Mayor. We were sold that in January. And we all went out here and hawed about all these wonderful jobs. And the truth of the matter is, now we're getting bit 6, 7 months later that we possibly have to put up $500,000. Now, I'm sorry, that's how Bristol's gotten some of the messes it's gotten in the past, not knowing or not asking the right questions. That's my opinion. And,
But we're preventing that.
baby.
So maybe we
but-
are preventing it. We're not gonna sign anything until it's right.
Yeah,
That's a
and-
fact.
My understanding is we would only have to pay $500,000 in the event of default. So as long as they install this and open the factory and hire meet their performance targets, then there would be no default event
that's correct.
for the city. So by the longer we delay this, it's just going to delay things. I don't have a problem with waiting and getting some clarification, but I think, waiting 3 weeks till we come back to meet, I'd say we should make ourselves available for a called meeting if we have to, because this needs to move forward. But I mean, you need to get clarification as well.
Well, and Mr. Hartley, we, since literally June 7th, we have worked on this probably on a daily basis. I know I reached out to Mr. Cook June 7th or 8th, I think, and he's been working on this matter. I've been working on it. We've tried to reach a resolution in regards to how to deal with this situation. It's a, I can't remember the January 9th meeting, what was said and what wasn't said. I can go back and look, but it's a, and I'm not sure who said what, but it's, I've always understood that the city could potentially be on the hook for $500,000 if certain performance criteria were not met. And I'm not exactly sure.
And I understand working with DHCD and ARC as well. I've had that experience multiple times. So I know what you're dealing with, and they can be slow to deal with as well. So that's why I say, if you can come up with a resolution or you need something, I think we need to, if we have to, move quickly and not necessarily wait, since it's going to be 3 weeks. That'd just be my recommendation.
Well, there's got to be a way to do this that keeps the city off the hook and puts the burden back on American Merchant. I mean, it may be them getting a bond on their end,
Well,
guaranteeing it
that's
to
what we're
us.
trying to do at this point is get a.
Yeah, it's double bond payments, but that's just the cost of doing business. I mean, they're coming after free money or taxpayer money, whatever you want to call it. And if they're awarded it, that's great. They get to move forward with their water treatment plant. But however, this city has been on the hook multiple times with having to pay back these grants. And this city is not in a position to pay back any more grants. So we have got to get the verbiage laid out to where this city is not on the hook. And American Merchant is going to have to step up to the plate and take full responsibility and full liability for that $500,000. However it happens. And if it requires 2 bonds with double payments on those bonds, then so be it. That is what it is. But
And I'll be honest, I think the issue that Mr. Cook's running into, this is a risk some insurance companies are not willing to take.
And if they're not willing to take it, then there's a reason. And the taxpayers cannot take that risk.
Right.
That's right. We're not taking it. Not that hard. No, it's not that hard. And I can't imagine being in business that a company that's willing to invest the $20+ million is going to squabble over $500,000. So I'm going to state the obvious, and I hope American Merchants listen, because next time I see them, I'll talk to them. If $500,000 means the difference between success and failure, there's something else wrong here, and we need to know what it is, right? And that's just what you see on the surface, right? So I understand these grants. I understand the government grants are hard to deal with, right? They want, the grantee wants us, the city, to be the conduit to move the money and make sure everything's done right. But when you get that final grant contract, which follows the grant, and you don't really know the language, and then it comes back and says the city needs to have full backing and liability, oh no, that's not what we signed up for. So that's what kind of started the whole thing. So we're not going to sign up for that, right? We're not in a position to sign up for that. So, it just is what it is. So hopefully it'll get resolved between the insurance company and the private company and ARC, and I think you're talking through it, and as long as you get those legalities sorted out, we should be fine. So a week or 2 weeks shouldn't be the end of the world. All right, with that said, we have one person that signed up, Miss Extraordinaire Nancy Marnie. You now have the podium.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Nancy Marnie. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a property owner. The records will show I have been a skeptic from the very beginning on this issue. Check the facts, check the figures, check your records. It will all be there. I have been skeptical from the beginning. We cannot take this gamble. We can't take this gamble. They did not do their homework. I was in the room when all of this was discussed, every bit of it. I sat right here through the whole thing. One of the principals came up to me after the meeting and assured me, now, Miss Marty, we're going to do everything just right. It's going to be just right. It's going to be fine. And my retort was, I certainly do hope so. And it's not. It's not. They didn't do their homework. If we don't get a bond from them, say goodbye. We'll take the property back. Now, in my opinion, this has become a crapshoot we cannot afford to get into. It's a crapshoot. That's all in the world it ever has been. And now it's coming to light, and you all, thank God, you can see it. And I thank you for it. Now, my summation here is this. If they don't have the money to run this business, then they should not open it. This is not up to us to fund that business in any way, shape, or form. We were told we had no financial responsibility, no financial obligation. That is what we were told in my presence in this room on this recording. Check it out. And that isn't what they've done. They're not as good as their word. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw my car. We have no business getting into this. It's a crapshoot, fellas. It's a crapshoot. The vultures are still flying over us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And that vote that night was 4-1, except we didn't have Mr. Osborne that night, but the vote was 4-1 to approve this. And, you know, and I think you changed my mind that night when some of the things you brought out. And I think you're absolutely right. And Bristol's been taken so many times that we're so hopeful to get a job or something like that and have high praise and so forth and so on. And the truth of the matter is, we've been snapped. We're supposed to have 4,000 jobs at the Falls. Well, we got 200, and it's been going on for years. We really don't think real good as a council. We think real good to talk a good game, but we don't think we haven't talked real good as a council, in my opinion.
Other comments? All right. We need a council motion of, my recommendation is to move to table
Move the table, Mr. Mayor.
until the legal language gets sorted out. Got a
Yes.
motion by Mr. Fleener to table.
I'll second that.
Got a second by Mr. Wingard. Any council discussion other than that? All right, please call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right. Item 5, closed session pursuant to 2.23711.A7 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, legal matter. And closed session pursuant to 2.23711A1 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. Appointments. Need a motion and a second.
I move we enter into closed session for the reasons stated.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Osborne, second, Mr. Wingard. Please call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. Ready to get started by roll call vote. Council members certify that only business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as specified in the motion to convene the executive session were discussed. Please call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, item 6, consider appointments to boards and commissions. Council discussion. Any comments from council members? All right, so we've got 4 items here for boards and commissions. First one's the Planning Commission. Second was the Tri-City Airport Authority. Next was the Southwest Virginia Community Corrections. And the last one's Discover Bristol. So after discussion and deliberation, we are making the following recommendations, and I'll need a motion on this, that we reappoint Mr. Anthony Farnham to the Planning Commission, that we reappoint Mr. David Maples to the Southwest Virginia Community Corrections, and we reappoint Karen Hester to Discover Bristol. And the Tri-City Airport Authority, because of the importance of that board, we've decided that we, because of a late interest by another candidate, that we don't have time to interview that candidate because of tonight's time constraint, that we're going to push that Airport Commission decision off until we have time to do that. So that's what we discussed. That's the recommendation for the motion.
Well, Mr. Mayor, then, I'm sorry.
The library, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where's Library Foundation? Oh, yeah, and the Library Foundation, which is Mr. Langley Shazer, which we'd already interviewed him previously. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we take the recommendations that you brought out and so forth, we discussed. Thank everybody for showing up. Mr. Maples, Sheriff Maples, I don't know how in the world you can do everything that you got to do between running the jail and being on all these things, but in social service board still, thank you for everything you do, sir. You're a credit for us, Mr. Chaser, thank you, sir. We haven't made a decision on the other, but I think we do have to be kind of, make sure we get the right things and so forth, so I'll give everybody an opportunity.
And I do want to thank Mr. Shazer. He's been very patient and come in here, this council member, waiting for hours and hours to go up for a 15-minute interview, and I appreciate what you're doing to stay with us, so appreciate that.
You missing a game tonight? You usually, don't you follow the Pirates pretty closely? Do you miss it? Yeah, but it's, okay.
All right, so we got a motion by Mr. Fleener on the candidate appointments as I read them, so I need a second.
Second.
Can I get a second, Mr. Osborne? Any other discussion? All right, please call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. There is public comment. Of course, there's no one on my sheet for public comment on this item. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Pollard. Oh, you got here late, so it's not
Yes, sir.
our
I
fault, it's
apologize.
your fault, right?
Yes, sir, it is my
I
fault.
just want to make
Well,
sure.
had a work emergency that kept me late. I apologize for not getting here in time to sign up. My name is Michael Pollard. I live at 101 Ashley Drive. Anthony Farnham and Bart Long were both appointed to the Planning Commission at the same time to replace two resigned members. The problem is that the resigned members had appointments with different end dates, and with a further complication that, according to research by the city planner and city attorney, one of these members should have had an indefinite term inherited by his predecessor. At the meeting where the city council made those appointments, they did not specify which member would be taking which slot. So simply put, the council needs to decide whose term will be 2018 to 2021 and whose term will be indefinite. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to comment to that one?
Yeah, I think council, I think you all have that purview if you want to. I explained the situation to you a few moments ago, so if you want to appoint someone to either Anthony or Mr. Farnham or Mr. Long to the indefinite position, that's well within your purview. Considering the fact, too, we are redoing the charter, and I anticipate that to be changed in this next legislative session.
So there's no sense really doing anything until.
Well, I think we do need to appoint someone to the indefinite position, and the other one would the other person's term would expire in 2021. You know, I explained what happened at the Planning Commission on Monday as to how the Planning Commission chose, but I think ultimately it's up to the council.
And as it stands right now, Mr. Long did pull his name out for the indefinite. So as we
He
sat
doesn't
here
want
tonight.
indefinite.
No, he was fine with it.
What do you say, when you said pulled, what do you mean by that?
Put their names in a hat, and whichever one pulled the indefinite,
Oh, and Bart Long got pulled as
Bart
the
Long
indefinite.
pulled the indefinite.
Did he fall backwards, or
No.
did he, okay, he was okay
No,
with
he
it?
just made a comment, he didn't know he signed up for life.
He got a life sentence by
out of
pulling
it.
out of the hat.
So,
Indefinite's kind of like interim, right?
Yes, it's
There's
like
no time
interim.
period on it?
Yes. There's a new definition of the word interim now.
What's the reason behind the indefinite? I'm not sure.
Council, I don't have a clue. That was something that was in the charter.
So when we change the
and-
charter, we're going to address it when we look at the charter.
Well, I think the way to address it is you just make every member a three-year term, and then the only reasonable explanation I have for the indefinite would be that there would always be someone on the Planning Commission that had some history of what had occurred previously from years back. Of course, when that person
Okay, so does
ceases.
Bart Long need to be, do we need to add that to the motion or vote on that next time?
I think that would probably be wise to add him as the indefinite.
Okay. So can we get a change to the motion to add Bart Long as the indefinite out of the planning
Certainly,
commission?
I made the motion, so I'd be glad to add Bart Long as the indefinite member of the Planning Commission.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second the motion as changed.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, item 7, discussion of rules and procedures, city council staff report.
Council, at the last meeting, I submitted some rules and procedures to council. I went back and I think I made some edits in regards to what, after we discussed what we need to do and how to move forward. I think, at least from my take and Ms. Storm's take, this covers most scenarios that we could come up with that would have an effect on the running of a council meeting. I don't know if y'all have had an opportunity to look at it in detail, but what I do plan on doing, based on any comments that you all would make tonight, I do plan on, our charter requires this to be done by ordinance, so I do plan on advertising this and putting it on the August 14th agenda for adoption as an ordinance, and then we'd have to have a second reading at the August 28th meeting as well.
Okay. All right, any council discussion? Okay. All right, on to item 8, discussion of the jail annex.
Council, as you all are well aware, back in the budget season, we had some discussions on how to move forward. We have an overcrowding situation at the jail, and it is a situation that's cost the city quite a bit of money for potentially for an extended period of time unless we get a handle on it. So the decision was made that we would set aside $100,000 over into a fund to allow some remodel of the annex. And since that time, we have met with an engineer. An engineer has gone, reviewed the annex, made some recommendations as what needs to happen. The DOC has come down. They have given their input on what needs to happen in order to make it usable to house inmates. And there are several issues, not only with the annex, but with the jail as well. And I think the sheriff is concerned about things at the jail as well, and he doesn't want us to overlook the jail issues to take care of the annex. With that being said, I think the estimates that we've received are what I would consider substantially more than what we set aside. However, I think the return on the investment could be recouped in a relatively quick period of time, probably a year to a year and a half, depending on the final amount. So it's something that we need to look at. I'm going to be meeting with the engineer within the next week or so to pinpoint some issues and see how we could work on making it cheaper, hopefully. And then I can give a full report to council at that time to address any issues that we may have, and I'll be submitting a copy of the estimates to you all here shortly.
So just so everybody knows, so what we're trying to do here with the jail annex is try to relieve some of the jail population problems. So if we can get the annex up to a code that would be okay with the corrections department and up to engineering code, then we potentially could use it for that purpose. So there's some things that have to happen in that building. We've walked through the building, looked at all the structures. So walls have to come down, sprinkler systems have to be put in. There is an air conditioning system on the roof, but since the jail doesn't have an air conditioning system, we're trying to accomplish that task within the annex modification, so we can bring some of that capacity of air conditioning over to keep the jail cool. That takes care of one of his big issues in the jail. So it's not just getting the annex up, it's trying to take care of a known problem in the jail as well. So there are probably one or two more discussions need to be had. When you look at the line item costs, now we're down to the point of talking about really, is this the best we can do, and making sure it's the lowest quoted cost that we can get away with as a city. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well,
Well, so if it ends up being that we can potentially, and this is potential, but if it ends up that it is okay to put the population that the sheriff can move over there, then, there's several $100,000 that potentially could be saved, and so there could be a quick payback, like you said. So if we spend several $100,000 and we are saving, so it could be a year payback or a year and a half, so it could be quick, and then we've solved the problem. So we've got to study it a little more, get the details a little bit more looked at before we understand that's truly what we got, but we're getting close. We got most of the data now, so.
What I forgot to say, the sheriff and I had a discussion this week, and considering where we're at, considering one of the estimates includes using city employees, right now city employees are covered up with VDOT maintenance work. I think at this point in time it would be difficult, even if we said, yes, let's move ahead with this today. I think it would be difficult to get city employees over there today to work on the jail annex. I think it'd probably be earliest would be late December or January. So probably the potential for anyone being able to go in that annex would be early or late spring. So, and in conjunction, we've got the alternative sentencing program ramping up. I think what we'll see between October and February is really when you're going to see everything ramp up to full speed with that program. I know there's going to be individuals probably coming into that program relatively soon. I think based on conversations I've had, we'll see some of those folks probably come out late August based on the sentences they're serving, and then we'll see more and more get into it October, November, December. It would probably be wise for us to consider, if we do decide to move forward, we not rush into it in regards to the annex changes, and just go ahead and put a tickler on our calendar that we're going to have this project and commence March 1st, potentially be complete by June 30th, or if it runs into July or how long it takes, we move forward with the project then. But I think by February we'll know whether that alternative sentencing program is going to work. If the alternative sentencing program is going to work, then that gives me a good reason to continue to move forward with that jail annex. If we see that the alternative sentencing program is not going to work, then we're going to be back at the drawing board next spring during budget cycle.
Did you have, Mr. Eads, anything to do with the hiring of the person in charge of the alternative sentence?
I sat in on the committee for that.
What a wonderful choice. Whoever was involved with that, you couldn't have put a better person in charge of that program. She's gung-ho, she's smart, she'll do everything she can to make it work. So kudos to you all who did that. I know Judge Johnson was involved with it, so kudos to the people that made a very good.
He recused himself on the hiring committee. So.
Okay, I understand. I get it.
Okay. All right, so with that, any other discussion on that item?
No,
okay.
sir.
So consent agenda, I think since we tabled the one item, I guess my recommendation is, do we pull 9.2 out until the
Yeah, I
bond
think you
surety is
can
addressed?
pull that out, right.
Okay. So if we want to go down one by one, we can.
No, just do the consent agenda with the exception of 9.2. Is that appropriate?
That's appropriate, because that would take care.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9.2 is the one.
Okay, so the motion would be to approve the consent agenda as written, with the exception of 9.2 will be moved with the tabled motion that we had earlier and be re-put on the agenda at the next appropriate time.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Okay, got a motion from Mr. Fleener,
Second.
second from Mr. Osborne. Any discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, with that, we'll stand adjourned.